So as Daniel said, I'm Sofia Schwartz-Salazar. Many of you don't know me, but if you are wondering a little bit about my background and why I'm here, like pushing you with something as this tiny kangaroo. Yeah, he said before I come from the University of Granada in Spain. I'm in my third year of PhD. My supervisors are Rosa Rodriguez Bailón and Rocío Martinez, and we all work in the Social Psychology of Inequality Lab and also at ThinkThic, which stands for Research Center on Mind, Behavior, and Brain. And right now I'm finishing, sadly, a short research stay at Global Institute for Women Leadership at ANU with Professor Michelle Ryan. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. Today I'm going to present a part of the work that I have been developing over these 3 years. And I call this talk Further Than Gender Issues because our PhD project is focused in the relationship established between feminines and some gender inequality related variables, but also some economic inequality related variables, including perception and collective action. So the idea for this talk is that I'm going to make like a short theoretical introduction, and then I'm going to present 3 blocks of studies. I think that it sounds like a lot, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. And if you have any question, please interrupt me or write in the chat, and I'll try to manage because sometimes I'm a little bit clumsy with this stuff. Okay, so first of all, we all know that we live in societies that has certain levels of economic inequality. For example, a reduced group of people have the same wealth that 3,800 million of people. And if we divide societies in 5 groups, the top 5 quintile earns almost the six times the income of Australian people. Also, the top 20% of the population in Spain earns almost 7 times the income of the bottom 20%. This is concerning, and these levels are increasing, maybe not between countries, but in the recent years, we saw a huge increase within countries, and it's becoming worse, this economic inequality. Of course, we all remember, for example, the 2008 economic crisis, and these processes of financial crisis grows this issue. And also is associated with other kind of crises that have some repercussions in the economic level, for example, this COVID-19 pandemic. Also, through the gender perspective, it's important to highlight that economic inequality is a gender issue, and that affects more to women and girls than to men and boys. And the trend of these inequalities in some spheres, for example, the gender pay gap in some specific professions or disciplines, is increasing over the last few decades. And also here I drop data that I find interesting about the Australian society, and there is that in houses where there are children and the female is a primary earner, they are in a greater risk to be part of this lowest group of the society regarding their income. So gender inequality is also a risk for children, not just women. This economic inequality is associated with some negative physical, psychological, and social phenomena. For example, in societies where the economic inequality levels are higher, they report more mistrust, more status anxiety, higher rates of mortality, more political instability, and of course, more gender inequality and feminization of poverty. And also, when people perceive that they live in high economic inequality context, they report less happiness, less group cohesion, less health, and also less generosity. But if economic inequality is that bad, why we still have this? Social psychology and other disciplines have studied this quite broadly, and in the literature, we find that perceived inequality is related with lower inequality tolerance and higher support for redistribution. And we also have the system justification theory that explains that when we live in a social context that is not good for us, for example, in a context with social inequality, we have a lot of discomfort, as I said before. For example, we don't trust others, institutions or people, etc. But we tend to justify this system in order to relieve this discomfort. And the consequence of this is the maintenance of the status quo. Here in this vicious cycle, the ideology has a lot to do. For example, we have these famous system justification ideologies, such as the meritocracy, that has a great influence over this process. And we also have the social identity theory that explains this seek for well-being regarding our group or even ourselves, and some legitimation or the legitimation processes. And this social creativity and some mechanisms that we endorse to feel better, also regarding the groups that we belong to. And also in this line, some studies regarding inequality reduction points out collective action to be a good mechanism to achieve or fight for this social change. But in order to endorse these collective actions and support them, it said that it's necessary to notice an issue, a problem to fight for, and also to perceive that this issue is not legitimate. So we wonder if feminism could be a mechanism that boosts all this process. This would be like the main idea of the PhD project. We thought that maybe feminism could be a good mechanism because since we see at the street is quite linked the economic issues, the capitalist issues, and also the patriarchy issues. Now here we have this image from some demonstrations that happened in 2018 in Spain, and some slogans as patriarchy and capital are a criminal alliance, or my feminism leaves no one behind. Of course, we are really aware that when we talk about feminism, we don't talk about a single identity or single ideology or single movement, but a lot of different branches. This is a little bit difficult to distinguish which feminists people are endorsing, but we know that these feminists sometimes, or a group of them, have some common characteristic. For example, feminism is associated with the perception of gender inequality, and also some of these branches endorse intersectionality and support this intersectional perspective, which means that from this perspective, we are aware that some different oppression systems interact, creating brand new oppressions or different oppressions, and we can combine this axis of privilege, domination, discrimination, etc. And also some experts point out that have this intersectional perspective is related with cooperation and pro-social behaviors. So we thought that endorsing feminist ideologies and feminist identity could be linked not just to reducing or this willingness to fight for gender equality, but other kind of equalities and against other inequalities. Okay, so our model, we decided to study this in like make a parallelism between the gender inequality and the economic inequality variables. So we try to explore these two models where the predictor will be the feminines, the mediator, the gender inequality perception and the economic inequality perception, and the criterion variables will be the support for collective actions to reduce those inequalities. First of all, we thought about studying this gender line, but when we were making a review to choose a good instrument to measure gender inequality perception, we find out that many of the instruments that we were finding didn't theorize gender inequality as a multidimensional phenomenon. So we started a validation process for a measure that we thought that it would register inequality perception as we define that. So first of all, we get some inspiration by this equality index developed by the European Institute for Gender Equality. And we developed a few items regarding these spheres of the daily life, and submit these items regarding 5 theorized domains to expert judgment. Of course, before we define our construct, and after this expert judgment, we got 30 items. But yeah, also we got some recommendation of the experts to rewrite some of the items, reconceptualize some of the areas. So we included, for example, the violence sphere that at the beginning was not clear for us. After that, we conducted an exploratory factor analysis with Spanish university students, and what we got was a 4-factor structure in where we have the health domain, violence domain, household and care work domain, and all economics and paid job and power and representation. We call this sphere power and public life. The first link that I sent to the chat is the list with the non-validated translation of these items, just in case you wanna check them. And yeah, finally, we got 25 items. We exclude few of them because of the higher inter-item correlation and some other reasons. Then we carried out a confirmatory factor analysis, this time with general population from Spain, and we confirmed this 4-factor structure with the 25 items. And later, we conduct a discriminant validity study where we measure different demographics, ideological, identity, and attitudinal variables. And we got this correlation matrix where the highest correlation between our scale and one of the variables measured was with attitudes or collective actions to reduce gender inequality, which makes sense, but still a little bit concerning, maybe messy with our construct, difficult to discern. And also the rest of the domains that we got after the confirmatory analysis. Also, we saw that the scoring at the multidimensional gender inequality perception scale was predicted by gender, age, political orientation, beliefs in just world, social dominance orientation, meritocracy, feminist ideology and feminist identity, and that the scoring in our scale also predicted the support for collective actions to reduce gender inequality, attitudes toward affirmative actions, and the threat to men's collective interest when we present some affirmative actions. So this was like the first blog that I wanted to present, this multidimensional gender inequality perception scale. And yeah, we thought that it's a good instrument to measure this gender inequality perception and the novelties in these different areas that we take into account. And yeah, it's validated in Spanish population. Of course, we need to continue with this process. And also we are thinking in trying to develop a shorter version, because, you know, when we design our surveys, we always want to make a lot of variables in a little time, and that's difficult sometimes. Yeah. Then the next step was to conduct few correlational studies. In this blog, we have 4 studies, but I'm going to present only the last one because we replicate the results and we measure all variables in there. So we test these models or hypotheses where like feminists will correlate positively with perceived inequality, gender and economic, that also feminists will correlate with the support of collective actions, that the perceived inequality will correlate with the support for collective actions, that feminists will predict all these variables, and that also perceived inequality will mediate the relationship between feminists and support for collective actions. Yeah, these are the instruments. Again, I'm going to present the results for study 4, which was conducted with college students. We got as a result that feminist ideology predicted the perceived gender inequality, the perceived economic inequality, and also both collective action. And that feminist identification predicted also these variables, but it was a better predictor than ideology for the collective actions, which it really makes sense because of the kind of measures that we used, and also, you know, the background of social identity theory. And we also found that our hypothesis was accepted since the mediation models were working even when controlled by political orientation, and they work with feminist identification as predictor as much as feminist ideology. The novelty here is that it also worked with the economic inequality related variable. So we saw that feminists predicted this perceived economic inequality and these attitudes for collective actions, and that perception of inequality mediates this process. So here we thought that maybe we are seeing a signal of this effect of raising awareness and delegitimizing the inequality that feminists will have, according to us, and also this intersectional perspective and motivation that gives. Of course, we still had to explore these causal relations in the model, and we also were wondering about what happened with other inequalities that also we see in the street that are linked with this feminist protest and so on. For example, we also talk about colonialism, and we talk about labor and sexual exploitation, etc. And of course, we still have some limitations in these studies and in these results. It's not clear the difference between feminist identity and feminist ideology, at least in the theoretical sphere. And sometimes the instruments are quite naive. We just ask people, are you a feminist? And they say yes. but maybe that's because it's trendy, but they are not really endorsing these feminist attitudes, so to some extent, or maybe they endorse more liberal feminists, and they only think in this leaning movement that is so popular, for example, in US and this kind of stuff. And also we have high correlation between some of the items or constructs. So yeah, we still have to explore that. This was the second block. And then we have the third one, that is experimental studies. These results are quite new, so we didn't explore them like in depth, but yeah, we want to present them and hear your feedback if you have any comments. So we decided to start studying this part of the model, because feminism, you know, is really difficult to manipulate an identity or an ideology, or especially when it's that politicized or is that alive in the recent years. So we decided to focus in the manipulation of gender inequality perception and see the effects over the support for gender collective action and other affirmative action. The second link that I sent to the chat are some items regarding the support for affirmative action. So here our hypotheses were that we will find an effect of the level of gender inequality, the perceived level of gender inequality. We also expected to find an effect of gender, so women will have more positive attitudes toward these measures than men. And we also predicted an interaction effect between both gender and perceived inequality variables. To manipulate the gender inequality perception, we also take some ideas from the European Institute for Gender Equality, and we show these graphics to our participants, one of those. So the high economic inequality condition on left and the low on right. And we present the data of Spanish economic, gender inequality and the average for Europe. So we expected them to perceive high levels of gender inequality or low levels of gender inequality. You know that, or maybe you know that manipulating this inequality perception is hard, because sometimes people just think that even the low conditions still a lot of inequality, or they are really aware of the inequality data in the context. So it's a little bit difficult, and we will discuss this later. And yeah, we measure as dependent variables the support for collective action to reduce gender inequality, and also the support for affirmative action and other measures that are being discussed in the Spanish context right now. Some of them have been implemented already by the governments, and others are on the streets. And yeah. So to analyze our data, since we have these unequal samples, we use Welch and Ovas, and we got these results. We found significant differences for the support for collective action and also for the support for affirmative actions. But when we look closer to the data, what we really found was a gender effect rather than an interaction effect or effect of inequality. So we also started to wonder if our manipulation regarding gender inequality was working. Also, we find something interesting that was when we developed the support for this affirmative action, we had like 3 blocks of measures. First one was a block that explicitly have benefits for both men and women. The other one was a block just focused on women, or it was more salient, the that women will get from those measures, and then an inclusive language treatise. And we didn't find significant differences in the block that explicitly reflects some benefits for men and women, but we found those in the other two. So, for example, we found significant difference regarding some measure that had something to do with women as STEM, or also the laws against gender violence and these kind of things. We didn't find this difference between high inequality condition and women and low inequality condition men. Yeah, and we also found these differences regarding inclusive language. So the conclusion that we took from this study, that we have to still analyzing the data and thinking more about that. The first one was if the manipulation was working correctly. Probably not, because also some of the participants sent an email to us saying, I don't know, I mean, I don't trust the data that you are showing us because it seems like that, like it's really low inequality, or even the low inequality condition seems like a high inequality to me, and these kind of things. But we also think that we have these interesting results regarding the gender effects, especially in the politics and the policies that mainly focus on women. There is that maybe framing has something to do with engaging people in the support for this action. So maybe we have to reframe these policies that are only reports only benefits to women, and make silent the benefits that reports to the society in general also. Yeah, and that was my presentation pretty much. For future research, we are still thinking on continue with the validation process of the MuGIPS scale. We also think about the role in or mediation model of other ideologies, especially the system justification ideologies. Of course, we're still thinking about testing these causal relations. We are trying to conduct some longitudinal studies, and we also have to do the economic inequality manipulation part and the feminist manipulation part, and of course improve our manipulation. So if you have any ideas for this, will be like really helpful. And we also are starting to explore other variables such as emotions or privilege awareness. But also if you have any other suggestion about interesting variables that we should include, are more than welcome. Thank you very much for having me here again. If you have any question, any suggestions, it would be like really helpful. I'm not going to be around for any longer, but you have here my email, and if you want to reach or keep in touch, you can send me an email anytime. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sofia. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So I think it was the first study that you conducted. Perceived inequality was the mediator there.
Yes.
I was going to ask, have you tried the other way around, that inequality as the independent and then a feminism or identification with feminism as the mediator?
Yeah, we have tried, and when that model works as well. And when we compare the size effect and the power and everything, like the model that we are presenting seems to be better, but still, yeah, like classic studies that take into account the system justification theory use these ideologies, not identities because they work more with ideologies, but as moderators. And that's something that we had also in mind, and that works as well. But we were trying to make these parallels between gender and economics. So we thought that feminists really at some point enlights this gender inequality perception, and we wanted to try the same with the economic models, but we think that is retroalimented. No, how do you say? Retro feedback? I don't know, like both variables and in constant relationship. So we think that in the longitudinal studies, we are going to find the same, like some variables in time 1 predicts the variables in time 2 and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was just thinking in terms of having a manipulation that the participants would believe a bit more. Perhaps if you were to, I guess, present inequality in more of a specific context and to say something like, oh, in a previous study we found in this specific context, so that they're less likely to have heard about that. I don't know if that would be helpful or not, but it's just something I was thinking.
Yeah, that actually that's a great idea, and we thought about that. Here with Michelle, we conducted this study in which we frame the different kinds of inequality that we theorize with the scale. And yeah, we're still thinking about the results that we got. We only conduct that study with women, and we didn't find really significant differences regarding the support to the collective action and these kind of things, the dependent variables. But yeah, we saw some interesting effects regarding emotions and this kind of stuff. So we really have the feeling that there is something there, but still not so clear. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
One day.
Can you hear me? My microphone's a bit mad.
Yeah, a little bit robotic, but good.
Never mind then.
Yeah, it's okay. No,
I
you
will take the people.
you can go. I can hear you.
Okay. Muchas gracias. Very interesting stuff. One of the questions and concerns that you highlighted is the overlap between feminism, ideology, perception.
Mhm.
It's all very intercorrelated, which makes it very difficult to disentangle what is the cause and the effect. I think you're on the right route when you start thinking about other movements or other selective actions, other perceptions of discrimination or differences, because that's going to help you disentangle all of this mess, and potentially even other ideologies, other collective movements like Black Lives Matters or the equivalent here in Australia. Yeah, and I was wondering, are you thinking of moving in that direction? Because at the moment, I would struggle seeing the head and the tail of the monster.
Thank you very much, Diana. We were thinking about including some climate change actions and some racial actions and so on. We didn't work on that yet because, yeah, as you say, we need to disentangle this, and we were not sure if we are going to get more clear results or we are going to mess everything more. But yeah, that's so interesting, and I think, yeah, I mean, it's a relief to me that you think that we are doing right in thinking about broadening the variables that we are exploring and so on, and that will help. But yeah, we don't have any results regarding this issue yet. And of course, if you have any ideas for dependent variables or other variables that you think that we should include or test, it will be like really helpful. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question or suggestion maybe?
Okay.
I would encourage you to measure at least 2 more variables. There's zero-sum belief when it comes to men. It's very interesting because it seems to me, at least that's how I think, if women want to get their rights as men do, there has to be balance, right? So it means that men should lose something because it's not balanced, right? If he wants them to be balanced, then they need to lose something for women to be able to say, oh, okay, now we are equal. And that zero-sum belief is very interesting to me. And recently we did a study with my friend in Iran. It's the baby stage yet, but we found a positive correlation between zero-sum belief, social dominance theory, and meritocracy with gender identification. And it seems that I cannot say that the content of men's identity consists of those things because the data does not allow me to say that. But I think it's important to measure those variables when it comes to men, at least. And we don't get these correlations with women.
Okay.
That should be interesting, I think.
Yeah. When thank you very much. So interesting, and yeah, definitely I will look at this paper. Yeah, when we started to wonder about studying this privilege awareness and this kind of variables, the proxy that called into our minds, it was zero-sum beliefs, and yeah, of course is a must here, and yeah, really good suggestion. Probably we will do it and we will reach you for sure. Yeah, especially interesting that it only happens with men. I don't know if you controlled by any political orientation or any other ideologies.
We are still in the process of analyzing the data. Okay. So no, not yet.
Okay.
We need to look more in depth.
Okay, but so interesting so far.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Sofia?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I was really interested in looking at the items in your scale, Sofia. I've just been sort of poring over that in your Google Doc. And I think a question that is on my mind is sort of more a conceptual question is, do we need to separate out, you know, the kind of fact-based questions that you're asking people where like they're just wrong. Like if they say that no, they strongly disagree that women take on more housework than men, or that they strongly disagree that they're more likely to be subject to violence. Like those are just, there are facts, you know, and then there are other questions embedded in there that are more about opinions and the kind of the rationale people have for whether those differences are acceptable, or why they might arise that are, you know, that they find, you know, that are more choice-based, right? So, you know, women earn less because they choose to be part-time. So some of it's more rationale and some of it's actually just not knowing the facts. Obviously, you've got data to suggest they kind of hang together. And I think work by like Michael Plato, for instance, would suggest that you can't really separate out people's perception of facts versus their opinions about why those social differences exist. But I don't know, maybe there's part of me that just gets kind of angry that we have to ask people whether they believe in facts and look at the distribution on that. I guess, yeah, do you have any reflections on that? Do you think there is value in separating out those two things, or is it fine to just put them all together?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I think that there is a point in make a difference between this. That here, I mean, maybe some people perceive this inequality, but also legitimize it. So I think that's the idea. So I think that we have to register it as two different variables and collect the data for those two variables, because I mean, of course, like the causal attribution or the legitimation or any other variable that comes along with or after the perception has something to do there. But I think that are also like mechanisms to boost these positive attitudes to collective actions and other measures. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but
yeah, no, you are.
I think that it makes sense to do that because of this, but of course still, it's quite shocking when you say people that like denying everything. So
yeah, and maybe that's it. I think as a social psychologist, like we like to think we know it's more complicated than just teaching people the truth, right? If only that was going to work. So obviously there are kind of key dimensions here around legitimization and other constructs. So that's I think you're right to be looking in that direction. That's interesting.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any further questions? We've still got a few more minutes.
I guess I've got just something, it's more of a comment in some ways. I was going to send you some articles. I think we talked about it when you arrived, Sofia, so I'll get onto that. But so I've done a bit of work around social dominance, orientation, and system justification theory it's a more of a theoretical framing, which might be of interest to you. But just to think here, I mean, one of the things, we've had lots of variables that you've mentioned to try and explain, I think, willingness to engage in collective action. That's what we're trying to predict, and that's what we're trying to change in the world, I think. So there's lots of variables that you've measured, you've developed your own variable. We just heard about more variables you could add, right, which are slicing and dicing effectively people's theories about the relationships between sort of men and women in society. And we're giving those theories different labels in terms of the way psychology does that. But is it possible that to understand what might mobilize people to action, it could be a completely different set of variables again? It could be, it could be leadership, or it could be norms, or it could be influence, sort of captured by framing. But if people came to understand the position between the groups in different ways, would that be a variable of interest to drive their willingness to engage in collective action? So we're really looking at very individualistic kind of ways to explain it, as opposed to perhaps an intergroup relations approach to explain it. I'm not sure whether you have any thoughts there.
Okay, I missed a part of your comment because my internet connection, but I think, you're talking. I mean, I heard the last part, which makes a sense. I think that it would be interesting, and that you make a really good point on pointing out that we are looking at really individualistic things, and maybe this leadership could have something to do.
Some work by Amina Subasic, I'll send it to you. I think Amina's coming to visit Michelle, I think in a couple of weeks actually, and she has some papers with Michelle as well on leadership. Men talking about the importance of supporting men and women, or women talking about the importance of supporting women, and how do those kind of variables, as well as sort of what they're saying, mobilize people to action. We for she, I think, is no, that's not right. She for we, I think, is the or he for we, actually. So when male leadership stands up, for example, and supports change, that's reacted to very different from if a female leader stands up and supports change. It's just a different way of, I don't know, trying to get some insight of things we could actually do. I'm not sure what we do about people's system justification beliefs or social dominance orientations or zero-sum game thinking, or, you know, what would we do to change that? Whereas if we think about it as leadership, influence, norms, what the meaning of identities are, then perhaps it leads us to a path to change things.
Yeah, I think, that has like a more applicable outcome. So yeah, it makes sense. I was going to say something about the leadership thing. Other thing that is that we are really thinking on, we also, of course, we have to take into account these gender differences, but we were thinking more about looking at common variables regarding men and women, and that can endorse both. That's why we also take into account men when measuring feminist identity or feminist ideology. It was because we were trying to look this variable that englobes or both. But I think that you make a really interesting point, and definitely I will talk with Rosa and Rufio about this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you again, Sophia, for that. That was very interesting, and I think a great discussion actually at the end there too. So just if everyone wants to just join me again in thanking Sophia for her talk today.
Thank you for having me here and prepare all this and put us in contact. Yeah.
And have a great trip back home as well.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed your time in Australia.
Yeah, I loved it. It was great. It was great.
So just on groupthink, so again, we've got another session in 2 weeks. Hopefully that time will be in room 201, but obviously, as always, there'll still be an option to join via Zoom. But obviously, I'll send you out a reminder before we get there. Okay, thank you, everyone. And thanks again, Sophia.
Thank you. Bye. See you.